Welcome to today's Explainer. So, we're going to look at your smartphone, your bank account, your wall outlets, and even things like your credit card or driver's license in a completely different light today. We interact with all this stuff every single day, right? But we rarely pause to think about how these things went from being neat, entirely optional little conveniences to inescapable mandates. Today, we're unpacking exactly how that journey happens. Let's start with a really provocative question straight from our source material to frame this massive societal shift. How did things that used to be voluntary become pillars of daily survival? Think about it for a second. Surviving 200 years ago basically meant knowing how to grow food, chop wood, and maybe trade with a neighbor. But surviving today? Well, it means navigating this incredibly complex web of digital authentications, credit bureaus, and utility grids. We're exploring how society takes incredibly convenient tools, offers them up as choices, and then slowly turns them into absolute, unavoidable obligations. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. From luxury to necessity, 2. The financial foundation, 3. Structuring physical society, 4. The digital identity mandate, and finally, 5. The point of no return. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover, so let's just jump right in. Section 1. From luxury to necessity, the predictable path. First, we really need to establish the blueprint for how a quirky luxury item seamlessly transitions into a baseline requirement for survival. It's a highly predictable 3-step historical pattern, where our choices ultimately become our prerequisites. It starts innocently enough, right? A new tool emerges, offering a better, easier way of doing things, and that sheer convenience creates widespread reliance. Then, driven by capitalism and a need for efficiency, society's underlying infrastructure adapts to favor this new tool. Finally, once the system is fully optimized around it, the old alternative is completely phased out. You literally can't go backwards, even if you tried. Section 2. The financial foundation, currency, and organized banking. Let's look at the foundational economic shifts that kicked off this trend, way before modern technology was ever involved. Imagine the sheer logistics of carrying a loud, messy flock of chickens to the market just to buy your weekly supply of wheat and fabric. It was exhausting. So currency wasn't aggressively forced on early rural farmers. It was just an incredibly convenient, lightweight game changer. It was a massive upgrade to the human experience that simply made trading easier. Totally optional at first, but highly useful. But as states centralized their economies and passed legal tender laws, everything changed. When the government dictates that taxes must be paid in cash, operating outside the monetary system instantly shifts from being a viable rural lifestyle choice into a fast track to poverty. The infrastructure fundamentally adapted to favor centralized cash, effectively killing off bartering as a realistic survival strategy. And this history perfectly sets up the next evolution. For centuries, hiding gold under a mattress or a floorboard was perfectly acceptable, and honestly, it was the norm for most people. Early banking was basically a luxury vault reserved for wealthy merchants. It was a VIP service entirely voluntary for the average person. You could live your entire life, run a successful business, provide for a family, and never once step foot inside a bank. But once employers demanded direct deposit and utility companies eventually stopped taking cash payments, the banking sector became a mandatory hurdle for basic economic identity. Think about trying to rent an apartment today without a credit score, or booking a hotel or renting a car without a credit card. It's practically impossible. Without a bank account, you miss out on payrolls, you have absolutely zero financial footprint, and you lose the ability to function in the modern economy. The luxury vault simply became a required checkpoint. Section 3. Structuring physical society, institutional schooling, and electricity. Let's move away from economics for a second and see how this builds into the very physical structuring of our society during the Industrial Revolution. Historically, learning happened comfortably at home, in small community groups, or through working apprenticeships. But the Industrial Revolution required standardized shifts. Mass institutional schooling was introduced largely to synchronize those schedules. In fact, think about the school bell for a second. It was essentially popularized to train children to respond to the factory bell. It was a way to condition society for a highly regulated, synchronized reality. As society structured all of its hiring pipelines, credentials, and business hours around the 9-to-5 workday, the state essentially had to mandate schooling to act as de facto childcare. What began as a centralized, optional way to learn transitioned into a strict legal necessity. Truancy laws were passed, making it literally illegal to avoid this system. Participation was no longer a choice. It was a socioeconomic hurdle you had to clear. We see the exact same physical lock-in with power. After millennia of living by candlelight and wood fires, residential electricity debuted merely as an entertaining novelty for urban mansions. In fact, a lot of wealthy people were initially terrified it would burn their houses down. For everyone else, it was a luxury that the vast majority of civilization lived perfectly well without. The smell of a wood fire and the glow of a candle was just the baseline of human existence. But once building codes eliminated traditional chimneys and appliance makers designed everything exclusively for alternating current, society completely lost the ability to live off the grid. It's just like indoor plumbing or municipal water. Once cities turned off the gas lamps on the streets and stopped building houses with functional heating hearths, the infrastructure physically removed our alternatives. Humanity permanently burned its bridges back to the pre-grid lifestyle. Section 4. The Digital Identity Mandate, Smart Devices, and Email. This brings us to the digital age, where the stakes of opting out have become way higher and the transitions much faster than ever before. Think back to those giant brick-sized cell phones of the 80s and 90s. They were pricey luxury status symbols for Wall Street executives shouting on the sidewalk. You certainly didn't need one to buy groceries, meet up with friends, or live a completely normal, fulfilled life. But watch what happens as the infrastructure adapts. Society systematically ripped out the public payphones. They phased out paper ticketing. Try reading a modern restaurant menu without scanning a QR code, or parking your car in a major city without downloading a highly specific app. The smartphone transitioned from a yuppie status symbol into a required identity key just to board a train or order food. Today, you literally cannot log into most modern work systems without an app on your phone for two-factor authentication. What was optional is now completely compulsory. It's the exact same story with email. It started out as a fun, quirky messaging board for tech researchers in dimly lit university computer labs. It was a completely voluntary, niche hobby. If you didn't have an email address in 1995, absolutely nobody cared. Today, try applying for a utility line, buying something online, or even interacting with your own local government without one. You simply can't. Email has become your literal digital birth certificate. If you cannot receive a confirmation code or a password reset link, you effectively do not exist in the digital infrastructure. The alternative to having an email address isn't a minor inconvenience anymore, it's total exclusion from modern life. Section 5. The Point of No Return, Accepting the New Baseline. As we wrap up this explainer, we have to look at the permanent consequences of these societal shifts. This stark quote from our source material perfectly captures the reality of this transition. Humanity permanently burned its bridges back to the pre-grid lifestyle. Once we cross that threshold from a tool being a convenience to being the foundational infrastructure, the bridge behind us goes up in flames. It's not some grand conspiracy. It's simply the sheer inertia of convenience locking us in. Whether it's physical power grids or digital identity systems, we've structured our entire survival around tools we once thought were totally optional. So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. The next time you scan your face to unlock your phone or hand over your email address just to buy a cup of coffee, did we eagerly trade all of our voluntary choices for mandatory everyday obligations? And more importantly, if you wanted to, could you ever truly opt out again? Thanks for exploring this with me today.